Welcome to all of our undergraduate residential students. Welcome to our graduate students. Welcome to our full-time and adjunct faculty. Welcome to our full-time and part-time staff. Welcome to our trailblazing herstory, theirstory, history-making alums, and welcome to our Board of Trustees. In addition, welcome to any members of the larger Columbia community who have joined us today. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Shashawn Dial. I serve as the inaugural Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion with Stevens College, and I am a proud herstory-making alum. So welcome to facilitation number 4 of 6 from our organizational training efforts, spring term 2021. And these opportunities to increase your awareness, to be called to action, to increase your allyship, are brought to you by the Equity Offices Plus Compliance, and that is comprised of ADA, Section 504, also Title IX, and DEI. And the amazing people who fill those are Shannon Walls, who serves as our Special Assistant to the President and our Title IX Coordinator, and Sadie Mayer-Strand, who serves as our Director of Student Success Center. So we would just want to applaud them for all of their work and coordination. And thank you to Lita Pistono, the Executive Assistant to our President Lynch, for all of your continuous work for troubleshooting and coordinating and making sure that everyone is where they need to be with the tools and resources that they need. You are invaluable, Lita, and we so appreciate you. So it is my pleasure today to bring you a phenomenal herstory maker, trailblazer, and today's facilitator. And today we're going to talk about the multi-generational workforce. So Catherine Clements-Jenkins is dedicated to protecting the rights of employees and promoting equity within the workplace. She provides guidance on the Equal Employment Opportunity Statutes by recommending policies and programs that will facilitate a diverse and inclusive work environment. With over 15 years of experience working in EEO, talent acquisition, management, and employee relations, she has worked in various industries from nonprofit to corporate to government. So Ms. Clements-Jenkins has facilitated trainings on generational differences in the workplace, Americans with Disability Amendments Act, sexual harassment, recruiting a diverse workforce, recruiting and retaining millennials and Gen Zers, and supervising leadership programs focused on the prevention of discrimination in the workplace. She enjoys serving as a consultant to nonprofit organizations dedicated to increasing their diversity recruitment initiatives. So Catherine serves as a member of the Human Resource Professionals of Central Pennsylvania and as a member of the Diversity Inclusion Professionals of Central Pennsylvania, an organization that brings diversity and inclusion professionals together to address the implementation of diversity initiatives within their respective organizations. Catherine obtained a Master of Human Resource Management from St. Francis University in Loretto, Pennsylvania, and a Bachelor of Humanities degree from the Pennsylvania State University. She holds certifications in human resources, ADAAA training, EEO investigations, and is deeply committed to promoting equity within the workplace. She is honored to be a mother of 2 adult daughters and 2 beautiful granddaughters, so they are affectionately known as the Fantastic Four. Her family reading, writing, and celebrating the richness of cultures and their delicious cuisines keeps her grounded. So Stevens community, just send positive energy and use what the ancestors gave you in your own space to welcome Catherine Clements-Jenkins.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shashawn, for that welcome. And it is my esteemed pleasure to be able to be amongst the Stevens family today. And I was just so excited to actually have a chance to come here and talk with all of you. And I really applaud what you're doing, Shashawn, because one, oftentimes we don't talk enough about the generational differences that exist within the workplace. We talk about other things around race and gender, but oftentimes we don't give enough attention to what it really looks like to have a diverse multi-generational workforce. So thank you for the introduction, and I bring you greetings from the very cloudy Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So thank you. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our presentation. So oftentimes when we think about a generation, most people are wondering what exactly how do we define a generation? So a generation is defined by age boundaries. And oftentimes generations have similar shared experiences. In addition to that, they also have values and behaviors that tend to be similar as well. So if you think right now about your own respective generation that you fall in, think about the people that actually are part of that generational cluster, and think about the behaviors that you all share, think about the similar experiences that you have. And so that is what basically researchers bring together and they define as a particular generation. A generation can be as long as 500-year span, or it could be 20 to 30-year span difference with generations. So one of the things why I thought this was an important topic when Shashan had approached me about it, and why I wanted to present that, is because there are dynamic changes that are taking place within the workforce. We see it constantly changing, evolving workplace within various different industries. And because of these dynamic changes that are going on, we need to better understand the generational diversity that is taking place right within our own workforce. So we'll spend some time today talking about the broad demographic categories that each of the generations actually exhibit. And then we'll end our discussion today with hopefully the goal to really refresh your lens on how you can recognize, respect, and value what each person brings to the table, regardless of what generation they actually are in. So we have 5 generations that are presently within the workforce. So when this particular slide will speak directly to the 5 generations that are within the United States. So we have what is called the silent generation, or the traditionalists, born between 1928 and 1945, and they represent about 21 million people. We next have the baby boomers, born between 1946 and 1964, and they represent about 70 million. And then we have Generation X, born between 1965 and 1980, and they represent 65 million people within the United States. And we have the millennials, or before they became millennials, you sometimes will hear them referenced as Gen Y. They were born between 1981 and 1986, and they represent 72 million people. And now we have the Gen Zers, which many of you are already familiar with, born between 1997 and 2012, and we're looking at 67 million people. So let's take a look at the US workforce snapshot. Now, we have about 158 million people in the United States workforce. So we have the boomers, we have the Generation X, we have the millennials, and the Gen Z. So when we look at the makeup of our workforce, the research is showing right now, and this is from the 2017 Pew Research Center, these particular stats. And you're seeing at this point that the boomers that are exiting, they are exiting the workforce in mass. Almost 10,000 workers per day are actually leaving, retiring, I might add. They are retiring from the workforce. And they currently represent 25% of the United States workforce, or 39 million. We have Gen X, who are at 33%, 52 million. We have millennials, who are at 35%, 56 million, and they are at this point, the millennials are our largest number of workers that are currently working in the workforce are our millennials. And then we have Gen Z, who are bringing up the rear with about 5% or 8 million in the workforce right now, but those numbers are growing. But the median age of all workers in the United States workforce is about 42 years of age. So if you take a look at your particular work environment, you probably see representation of this particular snapshot within your respective workplace. And with that being said, oftentimes with this particular demographic number and the representation, we begin to see many people kind of having some of the noticeable shifts within the workplace around communication, around values, around understanding, that are sometimes the differences as well as shared similarities. And so not only that, I wanted to kind of take into a global snapshot worldwide. We have about 2.4 billion millennials worldwide and 2.5 billion Gen Zers. And this information was taken from the Legis Group survey. And one of the things that we recognize that whenever we do have generations, we actually do have similar values and we do find similarities or key attributes. And what we're finding with the millennials as well as the Gen Zers, that there are some key attributes that are associated with both of these generations. And one is being very comfortable. They are very comfortable with technology. They want flexible work environments. They look for collective action, teamwork, and they are highly focused on the outcome. They're the generations that really want to know beforehand, where are we going before we actually get there? So they want to know, they're thinking with the end in mind already. And then in addition to that, they are very attractive to organizations and companies that are innovating, whether they are innovating technologically or they're being innovative within their workforce, and they have and growing innovation and growing in a global market. So those are the things that are key attributes that are being associated with this demographic worldwide, that they really want to be in environments where it's innovating either technologically or around workforce, people, relationships. And so when we think about diversity and ethnicity, 44% of millennials identify as being part of a race or ethnic group other than white. 48% of Gen Zers are non-white. So 1 in 4 are Hispanic or Latino or Latina or Latinx. Gen Z is more racially diverse and ethnically diverse than previous generations. And then 2 areas that the research is showing where employer commitment rate high among their priorities is 1, diversity and inclusion. They pretty much walk, talk, breathe D&I, and they are looking for organizations that basically understand the importance of diversity and inclusion. And I also want to put in their equity as well. And they're also a generation that really looks at organizations to say, what are you doing around social justice issues and to impact the world around you? So they're looking for corporate social responsibility. Now, I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and probably 10 miles up the road is the sweetest place on earth. And if you don't know what that is, it is Hershey. Everybody knows about Hershey, the Hershey bar and Hershey Company. So Hershey Company is about 10 miles up the road from me. And on a really clear day in the fall, I can actually, depending on how the wind blows, I can actually get a really big, nice wafting of chocolate that actually descends around my community. So imagine that. If you wake up to chocolate, it's a wonderful feeling. If you don't like chocolate, well, it's pretty terrifying for those that I know that don't. But anyway, I wanted to mention that if you happen to go out on the Hershey Company website and you looked up their pamphlet on corporate social responsibility, Hershey Company basically says that when we source cocoa beans, we will not source from companies that utilize child labor. That is one of their statements. That is one of their commitments. So that when you eat a Hershey bar, you know that this has been sourced appropriately according to the corporate social responsibility statement that Hershey says that we will not utilize child labor to source cocoa beans. So those are things that many of the generations, millennials and Gen Z specifically, look for with a particular organization. So there we go, being able to kind of bring them in, or they're really helping all of us really look at how we can be more socially responsible globally, and also helping to create a more diverse, inclusive, and equitable environment. So I want to spend a little bit of time right now kind of breaking down each of the generations so that you can learn a little bit about who they are. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what their communication styles, so that you understand that when you're kind of working with someone who is from this particular generation, that you have a clear understanding of what their expectations are. Because oftentimes within the workplace, we deal with multi-generational conflict because we don't necessarily understand the expectations of that particular person. So, traditionalists born between 1928 and 1945, they are expecting a very fair and consistent approach to the workforce. Now, I want to say that there aren't many traditionalists that are working within the workforce. It probably is around 1 point. No, I'm sorry, I kind of digressed. I was thinking about another group before them. What I wanted to mention was that the traditionalists, so they're looking at fair and consistent approach to the workplace. They're looking for clear direction and expectations and long-term goals. They look for a strong work ethic and discipline, and they are definitely loyal. They also want to be valued for their age as well as their experience. And they look for formal type of interactions, and they're proud. So when you think about the traditionalists, right? If you think about the traditionalists and you think about the time frame, think about the time frame where many of the traditionalists were born, when they were born. They were born during the Depression. They were born during the time that World War II was taking place. So you have to think around the time frame that really helped to influence their experiences and that help to shape the values that they have. So when you're thinking about interacting or you're approaching someone who is from the traditionalist time frame, I think you want to really look at the type of communication style. So they're going to be looking for language to be more formal and more professional. So they don't do well with, the slang or the profanity. That's not what they are accustomed to. That's not how they were brought up. And so they will probably frown on the fact when it is actually being used. And so they prefer grammar that is correct word usage when talking with them. When it comes to their communication preference, sometimes the memos and the letters work well. They look for the personal notes. My mother is a traditionalist. I cannot tell you how much my mother loves getting something written on a memo. I don't care if you write it down on, hey mom, love you, remember to call me, stick it in her bag. She loves it. My mother writes personal notes all the time. She is also huge on thank you notes. So if you give my mother if my mother presents you with a present, it is a given that she will expect you to provide a thank you note to her. So I think it's great practice because I think you should thank people, but my mother doesn't prefer to receive it in email. She actually wants a handwritten thank you note. So that's my mom. I don't know how many of you all have a mother like that, but that's what she prefers, and that's what we provide her with. And she also, and those who are traditionalists, along with my mother, they prefer the face-to-face interaction, the face-to-face opportunity to connect, to see one another, to look at one another's visual expressions. So this is the communication style that is typically most associated with those who are a traditionalist. So next we have the baby boomers, again, 1946 to 1964, and they have a very strong work ethic. They enjoy being a team player. They insist on being involved in the decision-making process. They're also very competitive. And they're competitive because by the time that we're in the post-World War II phase, industries were booming, people were applying for jobs in mass, and they had to really compete for those particular opportunities. So that particular mindset about get out there, get moving, get going, is a very competitive nature associated with those who are baby boomers. And they have a tendency to be very optimistic. And if you think about the baby boomers, they're strongly associated with the dramatic social changes that took place with the civil rights movement, the gay rights movement, the women's rights movement. So this is kind of the atmosphere and the experience that the baby boomers grew up in. So when talking to baby boomers and interacting with baby boomers, they tend to see relationships and business results as intertwined. They answer questions thoroughly and may look for additional details. And they also link their messages to the team or individual mission and their values. So when you're actually communicating with a baby boomer, they like to have the phone call. They like the personal interactions. They like the face-to-face. And then often, many are also on LinkedIn. So you can reach them on LinkedIn as well. I have a colleague that is really struggling through this pandemic because he is in a remote work status, as are many of us. And one of the things that he told me was that, I really miss the water cooler conversation, the opportunity just to get up from my desk, walk over to get, coffee and have an engaged conversation with a coworker. I'm not doing well because I don't have that. And so we had to kind of build a platform, or we're using Zoom right now, but I've used various different social platforms so that we could try and give him the face-to-face interaction that he so much desperately needed and missed. And I think we have to recognize that for many people, that the work environment goes beyond just work, right? The work environment also is a place where people have deep social connections. And so it's something to keep in mind across any generation. But I really thought this rang true for this discussion because he is firmly planted in as a baby boomer, but is struggling with the face-to-face interactions that he's missed because of COVID. And so next on our list, we have the Gen Xers, and that's where I sit. I am a Gen X. And one of the things, it's interesting because when I've done the research around the generations in the workplace, and it really has become a passion of mine because I think we miss so much the opportunity to talk about the similarities that exist within the generations. And oftentimes we're concentrated so much on what are the differences. But I like when I was doing this particular research, I was able to see so much of myself and the experiences within the Gen Xers attributes. So as a Gen X, they prefer to work independently and they value autonomy, which is me, that's a 100%, works best when given a goal, but not totally told how to actually accomplish that goal. And they're committed to their work and colleagues they serve as a bridge translator. So right now, Gen Xers, the research is showing that Gen Xers are kind of that bridge between the baby boomers and the millennials and Gen Zers in helping to kind of bridge whatever communication gaps might be taking place. And they tend to be skeptical risk takers, and they seek more work-life balance. So we're seeing now within the workplace, organizations are talking about the importance of keeping our workforce engaged. And with that engagement, our workforce is basically saying we need more work-life balance or work-life integration. And because of that, organizations are really looking at how do we create work environments where people feel engaged, but they also feel that they have the balance between the work as well as home life or personal life. And I like to say that oftentimes the millennials are getting the credit for really kind of moving things along with the workplace balance, and I agree with that. But it actually started here with the Gen Xers. It began with the Gen Xers looking at how we can have workplace balance. And so one of the things that you think about around the attributes with the Gen X, think about the latchkey generation, right? Generation X is sometimes referred as the latchkey generation. And for those who aren't familiar with the latchkey, when parents were working outside of the home and children would get home from school, they often had a key with at least my brothers, for example, one of my brothers was given the responsibility to have the key that he would tie around his neck with a shoestring. And so when they would come home after school, they typically were home alone, and then a snack that my mother would have prearranged for them in the refrigerator. They'd open it up, grab it, sit down and eat until one of the working parent would come home. One of my parents would come home. So that's why the Gen X is dubbed kind of like the latchkey generation. And then with the communication style. So what they say out there with the research is that with this particular generation, Generation X, there is a preference for a less formal type of dialogue. So where we talked before with the traditionalists who wanted things to be more formal, more professional, Generation X now, as you see things changing, are looking for more of a less formal type of dialogue or interaction. They prefer direct and straightforward conversation. Oftentimes with a Gen Xer, you don't want to beat around the bush with them, just get straight to the point. And they don't like their time to be wasted, which kind of goes back to getting straight to the point so they can accomplish whatever task they're working on. And at times they may appear abrupt. And a lot of that is attributed to the fact that they want more direct conversation. And so the communication preference associated with this generation is email. Shoot me an email rather than face-to-face time so that I can be accomplished on my tasks. So you see, as we move through the different generations where we have the traditionalists, we have the baby boomers who are looking more at face-to-face time, we now have Generation X now where we have a shift taking place that are looking more towards technology to create the space for communication. So with Gen X, they look for email, they look for texting. You can reach them on LinkedIn. The other social platform is Facebook. A lot of Gen Xers are on Facebook. So this is where you begin to see a shift that's taking place around the communication preference as we move to kind of a more um, technologically sound workforce. And at this point, you have the introduction now of different technologies that enable Gen X to do their job, but at the same time, kind of forego the face-to-face communication. And we now have the millennial. The millennials live inclusion, right? Think about, they have had friends around the world. Think about Facebook, think about Instagram, think about social media. They live inclusion because they've had an opportunity to connect worldwide with other people who are diverse in whether it is race or ethnicity or values. They have had the opportunity to make these deep connections with people, and some are deep, some are just connections with social media. And so millennials are able to multitask, and they expect to be able to use their social network on the job. So not only am I working, but if I get a chance to take a moment, I want to be able to look at my phone and then have a chance to kind of respond via social network. I remember years ago, there were many policies that came out with organizations that said, absolutely not, you can't be on your phone, right? And I see now a lessened, hard-nosed policy where that's concerned, where really they're saying, a lot of organizations now are saying, making sure that employees can still work, be on their phone, socially connect, but it should not interrupt how they accomplish their work tasks. And of course, there are still some industries where really it's not even safe to be on your phone. So there are still some hard-nosed policies around socially networking on the job, but you're seeing that lesson as more organizations are able to see and they're able to recognize that, guess what? Our employees are able to accomplish their work tasks and still take a little break and get on the social network. So millennials, they also prefer to work on teams, but may need direction and structure to really see the big picture importance. I have a daughter who's a millennial. She works in the health tech industry in Atlanta, and she always is constantly saying to me, yeah, I just need to understand what the organization is doing. They want me to accomplish this particular project or task, but I need to see how it relates to the larger picture of the organization and the vision that our CEO has. And because of that, because the organization that she works in is a 10-year startup, majority are millennials, well, they get that. They get that regularly. They get to see how the work that they do every single day connects to the larger picture. Also, millennials desire involvement with meaningful workplace projects. Do not just give a millennial a project to do for the sake of doing it. They really want to be able to have something that's meaningful, that connects to the larger picture, and is also purposeful. Millennials also desire flexibility to work where and when they want in order to pursue their outside interests. They love remote work days. And prior to the pandemic, it wasn't uncommon, excuse me, I'm dealing with allergies right now. It wasn't uncommon that organizations were providing maybe 1 to 2 days off per month so that you could have remote work. I had a conversation with my daughter, and she said to me, and I'll throw my daughters and my kids in this because it's really relevant to the conversation. But my daughter said that, if a company does not offer, and this was pre-COVID, she said, if a company does not offer at least 1 or 2 remote work days, I don't even want to look at them. I'm not even going to interview with them. And it was interesting enough, she said the majority of my friends in my circle, we feel the same way because that's how important it is to us. So you see now, certainly with COVID, organizations have been able to see, really it's been as dubbed kind of like this great experiment that actually worked. Companies are able to see now how someone can stay in a remote work status, and they have been in a year and still be productive at work. So you're going to see, I think you're going to see more organizations really begin to shift, towards more of an option to work remotely so that they can really start to build talent. Because talent, there's always a talent war out there for good talent, to come in and to work within the organization. But now the remote work provides that opportunity where organizations can explore beyond their typical boundaries, talent. So, and that talent can now stay in one place. Let's say if you have somebody in Pittsburgh and then possibly, working in Pennsylvania. So those options, a lot of organizations are looking at now. And also you have your millennials that are tech savvy. They are digital natives, excuse me, grown up with either, phone in their hand or some type of computer introduction when they were in kindergarten. So they are very comfortable working with technology. They feel in fact probably more at home working with technology than the previous generations. And then the one thing that millennials want to do, they need to do, is they need to manage their career with external and internal strategies. So I can take my daughter again, Ayana is her name. Ayana will manage her career looking at what opportunities exist internally, but then also take a look through other organizations around, around what they're doing, in terms of pay, in terms of benefits. So she's able right now to manage that career. But what one of the things I really want to bring out with this particular group, they are clear on their worth and their value. Majority of millennials will have no problem advocating for themselves when it comes to, I need a raise, I want more money, I need more flexibility. They are not shy about what they need within the workplace. And this is where we really begin to see a shift in the working environment where an employee is truly standing there advocating for themselves. And this was a little bit different within, from the previous generations, where maybe you might have gone in and you talked to the boss about a concern, maybe, or you just kind of grin and grin and bear it with that, and many of you have heard that expression. Just kind of, you would grin, bear it, and get through it. Either you stayed there and worked. If it didn't change, you would actually then brush up your resume and get ready to leave to another organization. The millennials, they will stand up and advocate for their rights because they will tell you, I know my value, I know my worth, and I want to make sure that you know it too. And so when we look at the communication style of the millennials, they value positive reinforcement. They like to tie the message to the personal goals or to the team as a whole. They don't like sarcasm. They don't want to hear, well, because of your age, you wouldn't know. They don't like that. Or, ah, ha, ha, you're a millennial. What do you know? They don't like that sarcasm. They want to be seen from an equitable perspective within the workplace. And they prefer immediate and continuous feedback. Gone are the days, or in most organizations, where maybe you met once a year on a performance evaluation. Yes, I do know that the performance evaluation in many organizations still work. And oftentimes there are several touch points throughout the year and before you get to the final performance evaluation. But with the millennials, they expect that if I work on a project, I'm not waiting at the quarterly chat session for us to talk about my performance. I want to know immediately. I want to know, how did I do? What do I need to work on? They're looking for that continuous type of feedback and touch point. And their communication preference is social media platforms, text, emails, group chat. So they are taking technology to another level to be able to have those type of communications with one another. And it's not uncommon that millennials also want face-to-face. And that's one of the things I do want to bring out here, is that you see the shift that takes place with the baby boomers to the Generation X, where the face-to-face conversation is concerned. But millennials do. Every generation does at certain points value the face-to-face interaction. So because I have that there's a preference does not necessarily mean that the face-to-face is out of the question. And then we get to the Gen Z. So they are big on individuality. And one of the things that originally when I started looking at Gen Z, there was not a lot of research around this particular group. But the more they start entering into the workforce, the more we're able to see that they are making great impact. And so when you think about the millennial and the Gen Z, think of a quarter, you flip it, they're kind of like two sides of the same coin, right? It's same coin, but when you flip it over, it's different. And that is what you can think of when you think of the Gen Z. So they are big on individuality. About 92% of Gen Zers have a digital footprint on social media. I have friends who have children who were on Instagram, Facebook, long before the children themselves even knew about Facebook. So they have some form of a digital footprint. They are more global in their thinking. Diversity is an expectation, and this is a continuation from the millennials. They're definitely more global. They're out there on more platforms, experimenting with different things in terms of technology. Think about TikTok, and we'll get into that in the next slide. But they are definitely more global in their thinking. Gen Z is also more entrepreneurial. They enjoy more independent work environments. I can tell you right now, I know several Gen Zers that have quote unquote gig assignments, right? Assignments or businesses that they're looking at trying to grow themselves. So they have a full-time job, but they want to be able to eventually have the freedom to run their own organization, their own company, be able to say when, what, how. And so we're seeing this far more with Gen Zers than we did with any of the other previous generations that are really huge on really making a firm stand on wanting to have their own independence and freedom when it comes to their businesses. And also with Gen Z, they want the flexibility to work where and when they and where, when and where, so that they can have the time to really pursue their outside interests. And they're very open to being mentored. Several years ago, I was in a CEO intern. We ran a CEO intern program at my organization. And we had about 10 CEO interns that were part of it. And at any point in time, they could come and talk to me about what an issue that they may have had, or they needed feedback on a project. And one of the CEO interns said, "Hey, Catherine, do you have some time for us to sit down and have a conversation?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. Just tell me when, where." So he said, "I'm going to send you an invite." And I said, "Perfect." So we had a chance to sit down together. I thought he was going to talk to me a little bit about the project or an issue that he might be experiencing in the intern program. He said, "You know what? I really need your feedback. My girlfriend wants us to get married, and I'm just not ready for it. So what are your thoughts?" So I was just like, "Oh, okay." So I love the fact that this generation, they're good with kind of blending the personal along with the work. and they're looking to be mentored, whether it is in the workplace or in personal life. So of course I gave the message, to him, look, if you're not ready, don't move forward with, the marriage thing. Just give it some time, make sure you're communicating, make sure she's okay. Okay, you all know how that probably flowed. But 2 years later, he did tell me that things are still going well. They're not married, but he really thanked me for the conversation. So just keep in mind that if you are mentoring someone who is a Gen Z, it may not just be the workplace environment they talk about. They're going to more than likely blend the two. And so with the Gen Z, they value positive reinforcement. Communicating as equal is critical. They too don't want the sarcasm because you're young, you just don't know. This is the way things are always done. They don't want to hear that. So also they prefer the frequent check-ins and the feedback, just like the millennials. Don't wait months to really engage with this group. You really want to make sure that you're engaging with them continuously. And I know sometimes the thought is, well, oh my gosh, how much is too much? I think with this particular group, with Gen Zers, they're used to having the constant feedback. They're used to having the constant engagement and interactions, because think about how they grew up, right? They grew up constantly being engaged in activities with their parents, within the school, within athletics. So they're used to and comfortable with the frequent check-ins and the feedback. Their communication preference is social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, you name it, they're out there. They also want the texting. I talked to my other daughter, who is also, excuse me, a Gen Zer. She tells me all the time that they look for emails, group chat, and in-person communication. Excuse me, I got a tickle right there. So I'm gonna let you all read this just for a second while I kind of gather myself. Thank you. I haven't had that happen before. But with the generations, how can these generational attributes lead to workplace differences? And as you can see, generational differences take place when people think that there's only one style that leads to lead is best, and that the belief that differences are applied 100% of the time to one particular group. And what happens with that is that it does lead to communication breakdown and conflict, and really a loss of good ideas within the workplace, because of us not really looking at the generations. And so what I want to just do and spend time over the next several minutes is to talk to you a little bit about how do we create more inclusive environments so that everyone feels accepted and valued regardless. And so I spent some time just earlier talking to you about the generational attributes that are associated with each of these demographics. But the one thing I really want to point out here is that this is not, what I gave you today is kind of a guide, right? It's not an absolute. It is not uncommon that you might see different values that are separate from what we talked about, because at the end of the day, I think it really is important that you see people as individuals. And I think when we talk about generations, generations are segmented according to their differences, but not according to their similarities, right? And oftentimes when we think about differences, we take on the notion that differences are less than, instead of really looking at how can we take a look at those differences, celebrate those differences, and then look to see where we can find the similarities so that we can engage in a far more equitable, inclusive type of conversation. So I think what our workforce really needs is what I call is a generational disruption. I think it's good for us to take time out to learn today about the different generations that exist. But I think we can't leave it just there. We can't just stay there. So we've got to kind of disrupt, right, how we have thought about the generations so that we can be cognizant of our own biases that exist around the different generations. And so that we can not only kind of catch ourselves when we find ourselves slipping into, oh, why does this generation act like this? Instead of really looking at the fact that they are individuals and that we need to treat people within the workplace and within those respective generations as individuals. Although, yeah, it's a guide for us, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we are looking at the distinctions that are associated with each person as an individual. And so when you're looking at the multi-generations within the workplace, I think it's really important to kind of look at what are the values that are associated with the person that is a part of that particular generation. How does that person want to feel engaged? And then what is the work culture? And what we're going to talk about now for the next probably 8 minutes is really the fact that as much as there is emphasis around the differences, we really are learning through the research that many of the generations are all having similar values around work. And so work values, I want to kind of share this with you, are multi-generational. Even though we've talked about the differences with the generations, there are values that are multi-generation. And what the research is showing, and Lindsay Polak, who wrote a book on the generations, it's called Remix. And if you haven't gotten it, I definitely recommend it. It's a phenomenal read where it really talks about the generations in the workplace having more similarities than they've really been given credit to, that all of the generations are showing that they want more flexible schedules and work environments. They want organizations that really reflect their core beliefs and their values, that all of the generations want clear pathway to career growth and career mobility. And they all want to be part of organizations that have good leaders, right? Who doesn't want to be a part of an organization that has a good leader? And many of us have been a part of organizations where we've seen where we haven't necessarily had good leaders. And organizations and generations all want to have purpose, mastery, and autonomy within their careers. And if you haven't had a chance to read the book by Daniel Pink called Drive, he highlights purpose, mastery, and autonomy as really being the key motivators that really help employees engage within the workplace, regardless of what generation you are. So again, Daniel Pink, Drive, he talks about purpose, mastery, and autonomy. The other thing is, according to Lindsay Polak, who again is the author of Remix, and she talks about, there are these similarities within the generations, and a part of that is around the communication, right? And that the generations, regardless, they want to have personal interaction with leaders. They want to be able to engage. And my CEO is constantly engaging with our workforce. He is constantly visible. 30 years ago, when I started my career, I can't even tell you who the president was, right? I don't even know if he ever walked the hall. I don't know. Maybe he did, but I just never saw it, right? Now I work in an organization where our CEO is visible, constantly engaging, constantly trying to learn about what's going on. So what the research is showing is that all of the generations actually want to have that. And they want regular meetings. They want to have those sessions where you can sit down and say, ask me anything. They want engagement on social media and on LinkedIn. They also want to know, how's the organization doing financially? So they're looking for more financial transparency. And we're also encouraging, when I have an opportunity to consult with other organizations, I do talk about them, the organizations, if they haven't done it, to look at conducting listening tours and focus group sessions, so you get personal face-to-face time to talk about what may be happening within your organization. One-on-one communication always works for all of the generations, and that's what we're seeing. Although there are some preference styles, at the end of the day, all of the generations are looking for are looking for one-on-one communication. And then they're looking at collaborative platforms to kind of work together. And in the organization I am, we currently use Teams. One of the things around empowered engagement, they're looking for all the generations: continuous learning, corporate social responsibility initiatives, flexible work scheduling, mentorship and opportunities. And what I'm finding with the research, with organizations I've been partnering with, is that regardless of where they are in their career, unless they are retiring next year, most of the employees are looking for opportunities to continue and to grow themselves. And I just want to leave you with that culture matters from a multi-generational perspective. They are looking for transparency among their leaders, meaningful face time with leaders, and they want to have a culture that basically practices gratitude amongst one another, where everyone gets to come to the table, where they feel like they are valued for who they are and they're treated with dignity and respect. And again, if you're working within the environment with the multi-generations, and I've had a chance just to take a look at Stevens College, and I can see that you are definitely generationally powered with various different generations, but that is what adds to your success. And so when you're working with different people in different generations, helping people to understand the why is always so critical. So I just want to thank you all today for having the chance to really join me for a conversation around the generations. And one of the things I want to just say, I love your mission around learn, grow, and lead, because I think that's what it's about, right? Us learning from one another, being able to grow together, and then taking that out and leading as an individual, but also looking at how we can partner with others to develop allyships. So again, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. And I think there may be some time for questions. 1 minute. So I hit it on time.
We're good. We can go a little over with questions. So first of all, thank you, Catherine, for the research, investment of your time, pieces of your lived experience. Thank you so much for weaving personal, professional, and just really making your bio and resume and body of work come alive. So
Thank
we
you so much.
appreciate that. And you worked it through the tickle and everything. So
Oh my
we
gosh,
appreciate.
never happened. But you know, you gotta keep it moving, right? So
We appreciate you so much. And of course, I do miss Central Pennsylvania and understand, Hershey. I was one of those pro chocolate people. So I loved being able to drive in and smell the chocolate. So I appreciate
absolutely.
it. A couple questions came to me, and I want to make sure I give time for folks, if they have a question, to put it into the chat. You can do it directly, or you can use the Q&A feature. So one of them, Catherine, was that we are in higher ed. And so there was a question about, do you have tips or promising practices on how to suggest, which is mainly going to be Generation Zs for our residential population, when it comes to communication? So for instance, they said, many students may email me, so this could be a staff member or a faculty member, and they'll start the email off with, hey. Or so, what would be your recommendations on how staff and faculty can reflect and offer maybe, oh, you might want to do more formal information, or, those kinds of language challenges between generations?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because I see it as well. And I saw it definitely with the CO intern program that I was responsible for managing. And one of the things that I did, a couple of things. Sometimes it does take, as I mentioned before, just one-on-one communication, right? Being able to maybe pull the person aside and say, "Hey, you know what? In the maybe in the way which we're talking to one another now, that works. But here are some recommendations and tips when you're communicating with others that you may not be more familiar with." And so the term "hey" is usually a familiar word that we use when you are in relationship with someone, you know someone. So I think it really starts with having an open communication with them, helping them to understand the difference. It's not about really criticizing, right? It's just giving some open feedback. And what the research has shown, Gen Z loves the feedback, right? So I think if you're able to position it in a way in which they can see how it will help them, right? How it helps them in their future endeavors, I think it will be received well.
Fantastic. That was a beautiful nugget. So, how it helps them in their future endeavors. Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're
The
welcome.
next question is, do you have any suggestions, given your experience in EEO and talent acquisition and management, about talent acquisition and management when it comes specifically to age?
Um, does that mean in terms of recruitment?
Yes. Hmm.
Okay, so one of the things that I like to do when I think about recruitment, especially where Gen Z is concerned, I want to meet them where they're at, right? So I want to find where, where are they kind of hanging out? How do I best reach them? And I'll give you an example. We basically we had an intern program. We had it's a great program. We only had like 30 different applicants that had applied, right? But they did not finish the process with all the different steps that they needed. So they needed an unofficial transcript, they needed a letter of reference, and we kept emailing, "Hey, what's going on? What's going on?" And then finally, it was like, wait a minute, Gen Zers oftentimes aren't on email. We text them. Every last one of them responded and said, "Oh yeah, we're definitely interested. I'll get that." So we had to kind of shift our thought process around how do we communicate best and go and kind of move towards how they communicate. So we had to meet them where they were at. And in the end, it was very successful. Um, the other thing that I learned that when trying to recruit, oftentimes use different social media platforms. Gen Zers aren't hanging out on Facebook. Many of them do not. If you're looking at trying to create some type of strategy around recruitment, you're probably going to reach them best on Instagram, right? So that's where they're at. I also found that quite a few of them aren't necessarily utilizing the career job boards. I learned that not too long ago. So I was pretty fascinated when I thought, okay, wait a minute, you got a career job board, but you're not utilizing it. And so we're right now working through how to best reach them through the platforms that they are most accustomed to, whether it's on Indeed, whether it's on Instagram. Some are getting the LinkedIn account, but we're just finding at this point to really have to sit down and have those, whether it's a one-on-one conversation or a focus group discussion. Oftentimes when we hire in new CEO interns, I sit down with them and I say, "How'd you hear about us? What's the best way that we need to try and reach your group?" And because they'll tell you, "No, don't put it out there on the college job board, because oftentimes we're so busy we're not seeing it. And don't send an email to us, send me a text." Did that help answer the question, Shashan?
Absolutely. Yes, that was really great. And the third question that I received was pretty straightforward, and it just said, "What are the do not do's based on your EEO experience?" So the person said, "Was there anything that you have consistently come across regarding age that you would tell organizations to cease doing or to minimize?"
Yeah, the one big thing always is around, I'm very huge on, because I do compliance trainings, I talk about different things around EEO. And I always say, you're not going to remember all the things, all the state statutes, federal statutes, but the one thing that you can always remember is treating people with dignity and respect. That's something that you can always remember. And so from a compliance perspective, it is illegal to discriminate against someone who is age 40 and above, right? But if you happen to be 20, it's not, people discriminate, of course, people discriminate all the time, but it's not considered illegal. But I think it's important, and what I try to do within the work environments that I've been in is that I don't care what age it is, right, or age that person is. We want to, whether it's illegal, 40 or above or not, we want to create an environment where everybody feels respected and valued for what they bring to the table, regardless of their age. And that we want to make sure that if you have someone who is younger, that we're treating them with respect and valuing the ideas that they have. But if we also have someone who is older, right, we want to make sure that we don't leave them out of the conversation because we think, well, you know what, you're older, you might not want to deal with technology, right? So again, I think what I try to bring to the organization is an understanding that everyone wants to feel valued for who they are, for what they bring to the table, and that if you treat people with dignity and respect, you're more than often not going to go wrong with that. But to make sure that age is not the reason why that you're saying that someone can't do something, you need to really have a sound business related reason why you believe they can't, and not just leave it to age. I think it's kind of the easy way out. And then again, it doesn't necessarily engage us in a conversation or a dialogue to learn more about that particular person when we just say, oh my gosh, they do it because of their age, right? So.
Absolutely. Fantastic. And very, okay, wonderful. So, well, thank you, Catherine. You covered a lot of information in a short amount of time. Again, thank you for weaving in the antidotes, and appreciate you sharing stories and experience and the thoughts, and even sharing like where the members of the Fantastic Four fit into this. So it's been a pleasure to learn from a fellow Gen Xer. And yes, you absolutely made my heart swell talking about latchkey kids.
Yeah,
I was a latchkey kid on an Army base, which I know you can relate to because you're a military brat as well. And so I just appreciate you. You represented military brats wonderfully. We're a special, unique group. And so really, again, thank you so much for partnering with us and being a vendor of Stevens College to share this facilitation and workshop with us. So any parting words on your end?
No, I just wanted to thank the Stevens family for having me on today. Thank you, Shashan. You are deeply missed here in Central PA, and it is so wonderful to see your beautiful smile and just have a chance to share some space with all of you today. And hopefully from this, that you have had a chance to look through this multi-generations through a different lens moving forward. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. And to our Stevens community, as usual, I will do a recap email with some highlights. And then don't forget that we have 2 more facilitations. The next one will come from Services for Independent Living. So it'll be our 3rd workshop from the SIL. So Jill and Renee will be back with us for their engaging facilitation about visible and invisible disabilities. And then late April, we will have the growthologist with us, Angela Harvey, straight out of Texas, who's going to talk to us about growth, making it sexy on the individual, communal, organizational level. And don't forget that many of these trainings are available on the Equity Plus Compliance's websites. So you can go to www.stevens.edu. And then if you do /ADA, you'll see some of the facilitations from the SIL. And if you do /Title IX, so Title IX, you'll find one of those. And then also, of course, the DEI page has a lot of our facilitations and videos on it as well. So thank you for prioritizing time in a very busy spring term during week 12 of the term. So students, Good luck on the rest of the term. Staff and faculty hang in there with stamina, and we value each of your contributions to our beloved Stevens College. So thank you all so much. Wishing you safe travels and mental and physical health. We'll be back in touch soon. Thank you.